Somewhere north of Igloolik, in the Canadian Arctic, a hunter kneels down in the middle of a whiteout. The storm is closing in, the light is gone, and he has maybe 20 minutes before the cold begins taking pieces of him. But he does not run, he does not build. He takes his knife and drives it into the snow 3 times, slowly, listening. He wasn't praying, he was reading. Have you ever wondered how a human being can sleep comfortably, deeply, warmly, in a place where the temperature drops to 84 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, 64 below Celsius? A cold so absolute that steel turns brittle enough to crack like glass, where moisture never falls because it freezes in midair and drifts as crystals, where exposed skin begins to die in under 30 seconds. Modern survival experts call this a non-negotiable danger zone, the threshold where clothing, technology, and instinct all fail together. And yet people have lived here for thousands of years, not as victims of the Arctic, not as visitors passing through, but as engineers of it. The answer doesn't begin with fire. It doesn't begin with tools. It doesn't begin with shelter. It begins with snow. And those 3 cuts of the knife? They were the first calculation. We'll come back to them. To most of us, snow is the most temporary thing in the world. It falls, it softens, it melts, and it's gone. It is the definition of something you cannot build on. But that is not what snow is in the Arctic. In the Arctic, snow is a material in transition. And understanding that difference is the entire reason human beings were able to live here at all. When wind drives across an open snowfield for days, it doesn't just move the snow, it compresses it. Grain against grain, layer against layer, until the crystals begin to bond, and the whole mass changes character. What emerges is called firn, and firn is not frozen water in any way you'd recognize. It's a natural composite, a matrix of interlocked ice crystals holding millions of microscopic air pockets inside it. And here is where the physics quietly turns everything upside down, because in extreme cold, air is not empty space. Trapped air is one of the finest insulators on Earth. Warmth is not created by heat, it is created by trapping it. The Inuit understood this so precisely that their language carries it. Inuktitut has dozens of distinct terms for snow. Aput, the snow on the ground. Pukak, the crystalline layer underneath. Anu, the snow you melt for water. Kwali, the snow that rests on trees. That is not poetry. That is a materials catalogue, the vocabulary of people who had to know exactly which snow would hold a wall and which would collapse it. And they didn't stack those blocks. They locked them in a rising spiral, each layer tilted slightly inward so that every ounce of weight is guided toward the center instead of pushing outward. It's the same structural logic as a catenary dome. A principal European architecture would need centuries and a great deal of mathematics to formalize. The Inuit arrived at it with a knife, an eye, and inherited memory. But the strangest part isn't how they built it. It's what happened after they moved in. The walls got stronger every night, and no one touched them. Step inside a finished igloo, and the first thing you notice is that the temperature is climbing. Not from fire, not from any device, from people. A resting human body gives off heat at roughly the rate of a small incandescent bulb, and on its own, in open Arctic air, that warmth is meaningless. It vanishes the instant it leaves you. But put several bodies inside a sealed, insulated dome, and that same trivial warmth stops escaping. It gathers, it settles, it stabilizes. Interior temperatures can climb past 50, even 60 degrees Fahrenheit, while the world outside stays locked at 64 below Celsius. At that point, the igloo has stopped being a shelter in any ordinary sense. It has become a thermal system, running entirely on the people inside it. And the structure doesn't fight the physics, it organizes them. Warm air rises, cold air sinks, and the design simply directs that movement. This is why the entrance tunnel is built deliberately lower than the living platform. Cold air is heavier, so it cools down in the passage and never spills up into the space where people sleep. No moving parts, no mechanism, just gravity put to work. But the detail that still stops engineers is this. That warm, humid breath rises, touches the inner surface of the snow, and condenses. And in that cold, it does not stay liquid. It refreezes almost instantly, laying down a thin, hard glaze of ice across the interior shell. Night after night, the walls thicken, the dome grows stronger. It is a house maintained by the breath of the people sleeping inside it. It is the only architecture on Earth that gets stronger the more it is loved. And that is exactly where the danger hides, because every breath is also a debt. Every exhale adds carbon dioxide to a sealed wall. The vent has to be small enough to hold the heat and large enough to keep you alive, and the margin between those two things is thin. This is where outsiders died, not from the cold, from comfort. Outsiders who learned the shape of the igloo without learning the principle behind it sealed the vent to keep the warmth in, and the room grew comfortable, and then heavy, and then quiet. Suffocation in that cold does not feel like drowning, it feels like sleep. They built the right dome around the wrong understanding, and the Arctic does not forgive that particular kind of confidence, because the shelter is only half the system. The other half is the body itself, and the way the Inuit dressed it was never really about warmth. It was layered logic. The inner layer, worn against the skin, exists to manage moisture, not temperature. The middle layer holds still air, an invisible buffer that slows heat from leaving you. The outer layer stops wind and driven snow at the boundary. And the reason the inner layer matters most is the paradox that kills people who don't know it. In the Arctic, sweat kills faster than wind. Work too hard, dress too warm, and the moisture you produce turns against you the moment you stop moving. The materials themselves were chosen with the same precision. Caribou hair is hollow at the core, so every single strand is a sealed tube of trapped air, insulation built at a microscopic scale. Seal skin stays flexible and waterproof at temperatures where modern synthetics stiffen and crack. And then there is the amouti, the woman's parka, cut with a deep pouch across the back so an infant rides inside the mother's own thermal field, skin to skin, breathing the same warm air. An Arctic child was not heated. An Arctic child was shared. Sleep followed the same logic. A sealskin outer shell, a caribou fur lining, and stones heated in the fire and set carefully near the feet and the core, releasing their stored energy slowly through the night. The sleeping platform is raised, deliberately, to sit in the warmest layer of air in the dome. And bodies lie close, because together they generate a shared thermal field that can run 30 or 40 degrees above the air outside. But the most dangerous thing in an igloo was never the temperature. It was what happened inside a person's mind. Fear, in that environment, is not just an emotion. It has a physical price. A frightened body burns oxygen faster, breathes shallower and quicker, and sheds heat at a rate a calm body never would. Panic is a temperature, which means that in the Arctic, the difference between a steady mind and a frantic one is measurable in degrees, and sometimes in hours of life remaining. So the Inuit train the mind before they train the hands. Children grew up on stories in which the Arctic was never an enemy to be defeated, but a test of attention, an environment that rewarded the person who noticed things and punished the person who reacted. Laughter carried the same weight. It wasn't entertainment out there. It steadied the breath, broke the spiral before it started, and kept a group functional in a place where one person's panic could cost everyone. Even breathing was taught deliberately, slow and through the nose, so the air was warmed before it ever reached the lungs. And there is a word for all of it, one that doesn't survive translation: isuma. It means reason and calm, and the capacity to think before acting, all at once, all inseparable. The Inuit did not raise children to be strong, they raised them to have isuma. And isuma is also why no one went out alone, why shelters were left standing along travel routes for strangers who might need them. An invisible safety network stretched across a landscape with no roads. Which brings us back to the hunter, kneeling in the whiteout, driving his knife into the snow 3 times. He was reading resistance, testing the depth and hardness of the layers beneath him, searching for fern dense enough to cut into blocks that would hold. 3 cuts, 5 seconds, a complete geological survey done by feel. He wasn't looking for shelter, he was looking for the material to build one. That is the whole shift. Snow becomes structure, cold becomes insulation logic, the body becomes a furnace, community becomes infrastructure, and silence becomes information. Survival here was never domination, it was fluency. If this changed the way you see the Arctic, stay with us. Next, we go into the Viking longhouse, the Athabascan winter lodge at 40 below, and the conical shelters of the North American plains, where other people, in other extremes, arrived at the same quiet genius.